Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. With me, as always, is our producer, friend extraordinaire, AA guy, sober guy, great guy. Everybody loves the Dan the Man. Dan the Man in the studio, everybody. Say hello to the peeps.
How's it going, everybody? I'm glad you're here with us today.
Thanks for being here with me. It'd be lonely in this little podcast room without you, and I wouldn't have anybody to be able to put them online. So that's a round of applause for Dan, everybody, for all the hard work he's doing to edit these things, get them online, and it is a lot of work. This man is working his damn heart out for his recovery to try and help other people get this. So thank you for that, Dan. This thing would not happen without you, brother.
Yep, it's a team thing, brother.
Yeah, it's one thing to get up here and put my mouth in motion, which is hard enough to prepare for these and whatever, but all that extra work behind the scenes, thank you so much. Again, that's the ideal thing about sponsees and about all your friends in recovery is how much they can add to your life to take both of you to places you never thought you could go before. And that's the juice, as we call it. Amen. If you're just happening on this podcast, this is an all things recovery podcast. My background is I am a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor in the state of Kentucky. That's the highest state of credentialing you can get in this field. And I've been in the professional field for about 23 years, and I've been sober for over 40 years. I had an alcoholic family I grew up in, so as I jokingly say, hopefully in the next life I won't have a single addict or alcoholic. I won't even know one. Wouldn't that be nice? But then again, we're awesome people, so I only want to meet sober ones in the next life. Let's put it that way. Who are working a program. I should probably put that in there too. But we wanted to create a podcast where everybody can come in here and get resources and tools. We really feel like in our 12-step fellowships that we have the keys to the kingdom. First off, we have a place where we can go and share our stuff every week, and we pity the normal people. It's like, what are y'all doing? I mean, I know what people are doing. They're drinking and drugging. They're overeating. They're watching Netflix. They're doing all the other stuff to escape. But where do you go to share your real self? And have a place where you can get tools and get fed. That's the whole point of going to a meeting. I teach my patients it's like going to the gas station. I got to fill up my tank, especially as a therapist. If anybody out there is in the helping profession of any kind, but also in recovery, you better be refilling your own tank before you're giving away, because you're going to end up burned out before you know it. And not only that, but we have this fabulous toolkit. And it's something I was looking for my entire life, a sort of how-to manual to get by in life. And I can take virtually any issue that's going on in my world today to a meeting, and someone somewhere has experience with it and can say, well, I tried this and this didn't work, but I tried this and this was fantastic. So, I mean, it's the best expert precision set of craftsman's tools you'll ever get just by going to meetings and getting support and building your fellowship. So we want that for everybody, and this is a podcast for everyone. So we're trying to structure it a little bit, but informally. One week we might deal with more of an issue in recovery, although last week, if it's posted that way, these sometimes don't come out in order. The honesty and authenticity, that applies to everybody, but particularly for people in recovery. But this week we're going to deal with an issue that touches near and dear to everybody, and I promise it won't be the heaviness. I almost have a gut feeling. I got to be careful how I title this, because I almost feel like that some people will not watch it just because of what a trigger this is. And the reason why I'm talking about this today is it consistently shows up in my treatment group as one of the number one triggers for relapse that we are not talking about in meetings. Think about this. When was the last time, and unless it was a current passing away of someone had very dear in someone's life, when was that a topic of a meeting? Loss, grief, and death. Really. And think about it. It's one of the most major things that's going to happen to all of us. It's part of life. It's the contract we all sign, that we know that we're mortal and we know that we're only here for a little while. But we do a crazy thing here in the West where we button it up, put it away in the closet, and we pretend it doesn't happen. It might happen to those other people, but it doesn't happen to me. And I also find that effect with people when they come in group. They're almost reacting like it's a surprise that people pass away. And I'm like, but I don't think it's their fault. I think it's the fault that we don't talk about it. We don't really, again, even with our whole process of the mortuary and having our loved ones professionally taken care of, and maybe there's an open casket, maybe not. And whereas other cultures in other parts of the world, they'll have the body interned in the house for a while, and the people come and visit and sit with it and celebrate that person's life. They talk about it. They teach the kids about it, And so I don't know if keeping it a mystery and not talking about it is really helping us. So that's one of the goals of this podcast, is to just get it out in the open. We do take questions at the I Am 1-2 podcast. So if you want to write in your experiences or have some issues you're dealing with around these, please send them to I Am 1-2 I Am 1-2 recovery. The word recovery follows that, at gmail.com. That's one more time, I Am 1-2, the word recovery, at gmail.com. And we'll be happy to address anything without identifying you by name. And please share your experience on this, because it will help someone else. So to begin with, I want us to expand our concept about what grief and loss is, because it's right up there with trauma. It is traumatic. And I think people think in terms of just death alone, mostly, when it comes to, you're suffering a loss, you're suffering some grieving. But to be honest, there's a multitude of things we go through in life that we have to let go of and we have to transition. If it's an older person that has to let go of their old lifestyle because they're no longer mobile, that is a whole process of grieving. If it's a person who loses a child that just goes off to school, that's a huge transition for parents, that it's a process of grieving, that they're no longer there every day. And what's your job now that your child doesn't need you as much? I've had people in my group who were particularly gifted athletically or had other scholarships, and then some tragedy happened in the meantime where they lost that scholarship or they were unable to fulfill their dreams. One in particular I've never forgotten is this man who was on his way to the NFL, and then he blew his knee out. And so it's very traumatic for him to watch games or to think about, what could have been. And that's a huge loss. And I frankly believe most of us who grew up in family systems without good tools, and it might have been quote unquote dysfunctional, I think most of us have grieving from our childhood that I wish it could have been different. I know I was thinking about this before we started filming, and I was like, I don't think I fully have grieved not having my father in my life. Obviously the parents did the best to do the every other weekend visiting, whatever the hell, but my dad was consumed by his disease, so he was emotionally unavailable, plus he wasn't a very touchy-feely guy to begin with. And so not having that father figure in that sense, I can tell. One thing I do allow myself today is if I see something on television that strikes that chord, I'll allow myself to cry. I can tear up pretty easily when I see a dad being kind to their son. The classic example for you oldsters would be an episode of Leave It to Beaver, when Ward would walk up to his bedroom and Wally would leave, and he'd sit down with Beaver on the bed and say, "Now, Beav," and then the music would start, and they're like, "Oh my God." And that was never the case in my family. And again, we've got to allow ourselves to have these feelings, and that is the only way to get through it. The only way to get through it is to go through it. You've got to face it head on, or as we like to talk about, the buffalo. We got to buffalo it. Or if you prefer, let's buffalo that shit. And what that means is, for those of you new to the podcast, is the buffalo is the only herd animal that when there's a storm coming will turn and face the storm and walk into it. And because they don't run away like all the other animals suffer the storm longer because the storm follows them as they're running, whereas the buffalo gets through it quicker and they just deal with it. And that's a big problem for people with the grieving process. We don't know how to do it. We don't know how to talk about it in our culture. There's a really weird thing that happens with people when somebody passes away where they're so busy. I have to set up the arrangements. I have to figure out the will. I have to hire lawyers. I got to do this or that, whatever the deal is. And they're so busy, there's no time for grieving. And then people say stupid shit like, are you doing okay? And, you're holding up really well. That is one of the worst things you can say to someone who is trying to access their feelings. You're doing really good being so brave. You're so brave because you're not feeling a damn thing. No, that is not healthy. You just lost your partner for life. You should be bawling on the floor, and people should be saying, yes, let it out. It's okay, because that is what will purge it. That is the funny thing about grief. It is not going to leave you until you decide you're done with it. And I say decide euphemistically. I mean, it's more like we do know it's a circular process where you will feel like you're getting out of it and healing, and then you'll be fine for a while and then triggered again and back into it. And please allow yourself that, because I do find a lot of my patients will beat themselves up and they say, I thought I was over it, or I should be over it. No, bullshit. Like I just told y'all, I'm not over my dad stuff yet. I have contemplated going back for therapy. There's no space for it in my life right now, but I'm thinking maybe as I'm older, I might be ready to finally cry the rest of that out. And that's the hard part for men. We're not used to crying. You just got to have that stuff come out. So if at least, I had a guy in our life recently who's a newcomer, and they've done their step work. So now they're accessing their heart center. And they're like, man, I'm tearing up at Disney movies. I feel stupid in front of my kids. And I'm like, no, dude, that's the beginning of your grieving process. And the other thing I tell my patients is y'all have so many tears that have to be cried. You have so many hurts that need to be felt. And the more we run away from them, they're just going to get worse. So that's the first thing I wanted to address. Now, I just wish in our culture there was a conversation around this with our loved ones, with our families. You know, do you have a will? Do you have a advance directive? Some people don't have any of that. I'm right now trying to get that buttoned up in my life. Again, it's more of that, let's put it off. I don't want to think about it today kind of thing. But I do know in other cultures I've been exposed to, when I was able to spend time with the Buddhists and got to spend 9 days with the Dalai Lama at the Kala Chakra ceremony, initiation ceremony process in Bloomington, Indiana, of all places, because his brother teaches there. I mean, it's like in our backyard. And I was like, what? And I got a chance to go to that. And, you know, for instance, they talk about impermanence. And they are really focused on that, where it's part of their meditation practice. And they say that every day you should be meditating on your impermanence. Now, why would you want to do that? Because it will make you more aware of how you're spending your time today, and it will make you more focused about being in the moment and really enjoying the experience and relishing what's happening right now. A lot of us are so consumed with busyness and thinking the ride goes on forever. I know we don't really believe that, but we act like it does. And meanwhile, our kid is over here trying to show us something and play, but we're busy trying to take a phone call and get dinner ready and everything, and we're missing the joy of this kid getting excited because they got an A in school or they did this art project they want to show you, and you're not being fully present for it. So one of the examples they use is they build these things called sand mandalas, and if you want to look them up on YouTube, they're beautiful. And at the ceremony, they were working on one that was the size of a full room. And these guys are bent over going with this little different colored sand to make this one little line so that they can make another line. And these things are extremely intricate. And they spend days on this thing. And when they get done, it is a literal work of art that should be put under glass and protected for thousands of years. And you want to know what they do when they're finished? They do this. And they have slow motion video where they'll show the guy going, and all the colored sands going in different directions. And again, it's about we're here today, we're not here tomorrow. We need to really relish this moment and the beauty of it. And I think if we talked more about this, even with our friends, when was the last time you even talked to your best friends about, you know, we're going to die? And yeah, that's not probably the best conversation starter, admittedly, but I just think we would be healthier for it. I really do. The other thing I found interesting is that some Buddhist traditions will let nothing go to waste in the cycle of life, and that our bodies are not meant to be just buried underground. Now, again, this would offend our culture, but what they do is they'll chop up a body and feed it to the vultures. And you're like, right? You know, but it's the idea that we're giving back. The earth gave us life, the earth gave us food, and now we're going to give back to Mother Nature by feeding its creatures. And there's a certain beauty to that I admire. I don't know if I necessarily want to do that in my last wishes, but again, it's just expanding our ideas about what this topic means. If you're a newcomer, I do need to address, you do not want to jump right into your grief work when you're just starting out, okay? Everything in your first 90 days should just be about getting another day of sobriety, whatever it takes. And I don't care if you got to eat blizzards at DQ. I don't care if you need to smoke packs of cigarettes as I did. Just get that time for your brain to heal, and do not jump straight into trauma work or to grieving work. I do also want to put a word out for grief therapists, because I don't want to say it's a newly emerging field, but I'll tell you what, I've been to several trainings lately where I'm seeing that there's a lack of, just like there's a lack of really good trauma therapists, and there are people who specialize, and it'll be part of their information that I work with grief, I work with trauma, and they can also be a great guide to help you with your process. But that is the main thing to focus on when you're in grief. It's a process. It's going to take time, and don't rush it, and because it'll come back later. And use your supports. I know another thing I hear from a lot of people going through grief is, I feel like I've talked about it so much, people are sick about hearing it. And that wouldn't be true for me, and I don't think that would be true for Dan. So I know 2 people that would be happy to hear you talk about what you need to talk about just to get off your chest. But it's this weird idea that we have in America that we're supposed to have a set period, and that's okay, but then after that period, it's not okay to still be in it. And that's just not the way it works. Everybody's an individual, and each person you lose is going to be individually based. It's such a weird topic. I'm going to defer early to Dan on this because I don't want to just run the same ground over and over. But let's just start with this, Dan. Let's just do a little conversating here. Why is it so difficult, do you think, in your experience, to talk about our experience with loss, grief, and death?
There's a piece of me that wants to say we have lost it. It's another one of these things with technology and the stuff that we got going on is just like a unintended consequence that this fell in the wash with some other things that we used to know how to do, and we don't know how to do it anymore. Back 100 years ago, here in America, death was normal, and they did things like the wakes, and the body stayed there, and you didn't have we also had this 24/7 fast service on that. Somebody dies, you can have them out of here in 20 minutes, brother. We'll come get them, and
like a Big Mac.
Yeah, right, yeah. And I don't think that's good for us. I think we've sped it along, we've then, and by and it's probably the same thing, by our inherent
fear. I think it's fear
of death.
Mm-hmm.
Has caused us to say, okay, let's not see it for too long, and we're not emotionally digesting it in the way that we would or should.
It's such a crazy fear. It's almost like we feel like it's the plague. Well, if I focus on it too long, I might get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I kind of feel this way a little bit. Sometimes going to hospitals, it's like, I don't like being in here. They're going to keep me here. Yeah. I'm going to get something,
Yeah.
But I know you went through a process, and I wanted to talk about my own process to get it started. But my dad passed away from colon cancer at 56. And I remember when I passed his age in my sobriety, I considered that a major accomplishment that I feel like he would be proud of, that, because of our family legacy of drinkers, just making it a day longer than your afflicted parent did is a major accomplishment. But before he passed, I really tried to reach out to him because I had sobriety and I had some of these tools of authenticity and sharing your feelings. And he just wasn't able to, from his wrecked brain from alcohol. In fact, he was more like a shell. His eyes were black and vacant, like a shark eyes, almost dead, And I think the chemo really took him out of him. I mean, I've seen so many people go through that and get wrecked. It's really made me question what I would do in that situation. But I did want to address this because I know you lost your mother, and it's a seminal moment in every person's lives when your parents pass, okay? And that's not taking anything away from God forbid you should lose a child. That is the absolute worst. That is completely against nature that the child would die before you do. But for a man and his father to lose that relationship and then reflect on what you didn't have. And again, I remember I was driving him to the airport back to Chicago where he lived. And we were in my old Trans Am I had, smoking the Bandit Edition. And I just tried. And there was nothing there. There was just a locked door. But at least I tried. And so at least I didn't have that leftover guilt of, well, I wish I could have, or I wish I had said. Which is so important before somebody passes, is the ability to spend time with them and really talk about real stuff. You want to share a little bit about losing your mother and what that process was like for you?
Yeah, and I learned a lot in that. My mom died for a long time. She had a neck surgery and had a stroke during the surgery, and she never was the same again. And that happened, and I was I was 6 months sober or something when Mom got sick, and then she finally passed when I was 13 months, a year and a month sober. So it was tough to, I'm glad that I got to do amends with my mom directly. I do question a little bit of like what kind of state she was in when I did it. I had to just shake that off and don't worry about it. She was what she was, and but I don't know how much of it. She just wasn't capable of like. Well, she couldn't hardly speak, and also like I think that bacon thing before she had passed, you couldn't feel that you were talking and getting anywhere. But and then when I had just not been one of these guys all my life that made a big deal about dying, or when people died, sometimes it's almost like, somebody died and it's about you, it's more about,
always, if you're an alcoholic or an addict,
they died on me. Can you believe that they've done this to me? And I just never have been been hit hard by it. Now, I also haven't been around a ton of death, to be honest with you. Most people, I know more people who's died since I've been in recovery than I have, family members and stuff, and most of them lived long lives, and so there's not a lot. I don't know. I didn't have a lot of hang up about death, and still don't feel like I did. But that essential piece of my mom's passing, I didn't do. I didn't truly grieve her passing for a couple years. And actually, you and I worked together on something to do to maybe help that process along. And I still have a little, because my mom was cremated. I didn't keep her ashes, so you don't have the benefit of visiting a gravesite or anything like that. And I made one at Fargo. I made a monument that nobody else would have any idea what it is besides this pile of rocks. I'm always wondering if someday somebody ain't going to take one of them. Just pick up a rock and take it. But I did that, and I went out there, and for all intents and purposes, I made myself cry. And once I could let go a little bit, then I could actually feel that grief leave me, almost like it was cathartic to do that. And I still visit that little pile of rocks when I go down to the cabin on most occasions. And I have a little place to kind of go, hey, hi, Mom. Things are going well. Hope you see me. Hope you're proud of me. And have a little monument spot. I discounted the value. We do some weird things. We used to put us back in the ground in something where we would decompose. Today they put you in a vault in the ground, and you're never going to decompose. You're not going to go back to nature anymore. Seems like we're going to. Wouldn't it seem like we'd run out of room for cemeteries by now?
It would seem that. It would seem that.
I mean, how many people have died in the history of the world?
I often think about that about housing, but, I have driven across this country, and it's astounding how much land we have in America still.
Yeah.
It's a lot of empty land out there. It might not be hospitable like the deserts, but it's still available.
Yeah.
I really love what you did there, though, because you created a sense of ritual and ceremony to honor your mom's spirit, and it doesn't matter where it's at. You did this between you and her, and I think that's a great tool to offer people who maybe after they got through with the funeral and they're so busy, and then all the busyness ends and the dust settles, but they don't feel like they got their time with their loved one, and so they can do their own ceremony. I know many people have taken ashes out to sea or wherever they wanted them scattered, and that helped them to put a period, at least for the moment, on it. But I think that's wonderful, and that you still honor her memory and go visit it. I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Well, thank you, Christopher, because it was your idea.
Oh, was it? It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. It was a long time ago. But you did one of those things, and we were just talking about it. Mom had passed a little while ago, and you said, "Hey, Spons, by the way, I take it or leave it. I'm just feeling this. That I don't know that you've really grieved the death of your mom." And we talked about it, and you mentioned something like this, and we formed it up, and I executed it.
I love it.
Forever grateful for it.
Another thing that happened at my dad's funeral, which was impactful, is we were at the open casket with my mother, and she insisted that we touch him. And it was really intimidating because my dad and I did not have physical contact, right? So I made a point to do it, and I touched his forehead, and it's really, you talk about driving home the fact that we are not our body. Because I could have been touching this table. It was just a piece of wood. It was an empty capsule. And that feeds into a story. I remember my mom telling me one time that she found this bird that had been injured and was dying, and she was trying to care for it in its last minutes, and she was holding it in her hand, and then the bird just passed. And she could tell it was there, and then it's not there. It's like the essence and the spirit of the bird just left, and this was just like a piece of wood, a carcass, just this little block right here. It didn't mean anything. So, again, we live on land where the Native Americans believed that their ancestors spoke to them and visited them in dreams, and it was very important to pay attention that they were giving you messages. And we don't even talk about that. And yet I'll have patients in my group, and I love to ask them if they bring up that they were particularly close with the person they lost. I said, well, do you ever feel their presence? Do you ever feel like they're speaking to you or visiting you? And sometimes they'll come straight out and say, oh, yeah. And they've never told anybody. You know, why are we not talking about that? That's beautiful. That they would be able to, I mean, if I had the ability when I passed and I could come back and say, hey, Dan, what's up? Yeah. I would try, you know? To give us hope, you know, that there's something beyond, there's something more than this. The other thing that was a powerful lesson, a little off topic, but I think it might help people, is that remember we talk about in recovery, you're trying to go back and unwind this mystery of what happened to you. And you're going to get nuggets at times from your family and from events or just whatever occurs around you, that'll be just like gold. You're going to be like, oh, that explains a lot. So after the funeral service, we're in the church. It's my job to go up and get my grandmother, and which is with his mother, and walk her down the aisle. You know, they were to exit first. So we got about halfway down the aisle going out, and it wasn't until that moment that it all just hit me like a ton of flipping bricks. I had no option. It was going to come out. So I started going, it starts just coming out. And why shouldn't it? I'm at the funeral of my damn father. And this woman, all of 90 pounds, short as hell, skinny as hell, cold, hard Irish, goes with her arm like this on me. That's it. She didn't look at me. She just did that. Which is like, you stop there crying. I could just feel it, man. Wow. And I was like, well, there you go. Now I know I'm so effed up. Because that is not natural not to cry when you lose your freaking father. How dare you take that away? But that was all her baggage. That was all her programming of keeping up appearances, you know. Be strong. Like I just said at the beginning of this podcast, worst thing you can say to somebody, you're being so brave. Stop that. You're feeding them going to feel worse because they're not letting it out. So, yeah. So, if anybody's having any issues with this and you want to write us in, please do. We'd love to hear any questions or any experience you have with this. Most of what I wanted to do today in the podcast is create a dialogue where it's safe to share. As we always say in the program, start first with your main supports. Don't just throw it out there. Don't talk about it at work. But, you know, in the right environment where nobody's distracted, you can bring it up with your sponsor, with your friends, and just say, you know, what's your experience with death? What's your experience with the process of grief? And how did you find out as you were going through the steps, especially the fourth step, how much grief still played a role in your drinking and drugging and you weren't even aware that was a big driving force? And why is it not okay just to talk about it? That's all. We're not going to do any major therapy work, not at first. We're just going to dialogue. We're just going to discuss it. And that's the hard part, I think, is just to bring it up and talk about it. I know you lost that friend of yours that you said was a mentor, kind of older gentleman in your life when you were growing up.
Yep.
Say anything about that recently?
That's another good point. I don't know, it's a little bit different kind of relationship. I certainly, I took it upon myself to do my own they didn't have a ceremony or anything. I'd have went. So there wasn't any of that. So echoing off that last thing, I kind of did my own little ceremony, and actually I do. I remember shedding some tears over Billy. Now that I say that, I was actually telling somebody. I was talking to him on the phone, telling him what the dude meant to me, and found myself crying. And I don't stop it either. I shed tears today when a buddy of mine told me about his story that he's having a birthday party this weekend, and he was talking about his papa coming and so and so coming, and he said his Uncle Dan coming, and tears come down my face as I heard that today.
So a couple of extra points I want to tack on as well before we wrap it up and get some letters in here. Bill Burr, the comedian, was talking on his podcast recently that he had to go to a funeral, and then they played the out music, and it was When the Saints Go Marching In. And he said how it shifted the entire mood into a celebration of that person's life rather than going out with this, oh, it's so horrible and everything. And so it made him start thinking, yeah, well, what would I choose if it was my funeral? What would be my out music, you know? And he goes, well, I wouldn't want to play AC/DC because that's all about hell and the devil and stuff. So I don't want to incur any of that. But, you know, he said, I don't know, maybe some Sinatra song or something like that to just, you know, say, yeah, screw y'all, I'm good, you know? And, you know, planning out your services, planning out what you want, talking to your loved ones about that. I didn't get any of that in my family. I wouldn't have a vague idea. Even today, I don't know what my mom wants. Maybe my sisters talk to her, but again, it's that weirdness of why can't we talk about it? My mom's 89, for God's sakes. You would think we should be talking about it. I'm sure it's on her mind, you know, but we're pretending like it's not going to happen or something. The other thing I really wanted to touch on with people in recovery, working the tools, guys, please, 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 and I know Dan will have something to share on this, do not wait to make your amends with your parents and with people that are older that could pass away on you, particularly grandparents and anybody else like that. I have had to console more men than I could count when they got to their ninth step and they wished they had done that, but they were too busy getting high. But they wished they had done that while the person was still alive. Now, we have a process, and it's in the book, where the book says if some people can't be seen, so we write them an honest letter, which you can do, and then we take that to the gravesite and we spend time. And I've walked many men through that path, and it's been very spiritual, very juicy. But it's nothing like being able to talk to the person right in the eyes to say, I screwed up and I need to make this right with you. So I know you've had that experience with some of your guys, right, Dan? And they all express the same regret. They wish they had gotten sober earlier so they could have made amends.
Yep. With past people, parents and grandparents, you know, and the grandparent thing's a little bit different. And I just can't, I want to echo, you know, your living loved ones that are close to you like that, man, get through this work and get out in the ninth step, and don't let that opportunity pass by, because it's a horrible thing to know that you could have done it and you didn't. And you know, here's a whole nother thing you got to grieve is to yourself a little bit on on not taking action. But amends are hard to, you know, it's tough to get people to do their amends.
It is, especially their primary ones, the hard ones. All right, so before we wrap up, I promised myself I was going to end on a very positive note with all of this stuff, because there is room for positivity. I just told you the value of impermanence, and I told you the value of knowing that this doesn't go on forever, and being focused. Get busy doing what you want to do. Do not wait. You never know when things are going to change. You won't be able to have that opportunity. But my old spiritual teacher, Marion, used to talk about death as graduation day. And she served as a minister over many funerals. And she would talk about, we are sad because we miss the person, and we need to grieve, and we need to have our feelings, and that feels depressing, and it's hard. But what is really cool is the reason why we are sad is that that person touched our lives that much, that we cared enough to show up, and that we had feelings about it. And that's a wonderful gift, that we have that bond and that connection with someone, and they made that big of an impact on our life that we would care that much. So when she would say graduation day, she would mean that that person's work here on earth was done. The soul does go on. Nobody knows for sure. But as I said in group today, the only thing that's ever made sense to me when it comes to spirituality and why we go through what we go through as human beings is that we're all in school. And we're here to grow and evolve and develop, just like every other part of life. You can look at plants, you can look at animals, you can look at viruses like COVID. It's all about evolving, growing, and changing and becoming better. So when she would say we're all in school, and that person graduated because they finished their lessons, they finished what they needed to get done. And it's never on our timetable, guys. That person's soul has a blueprint, and they have their goals, and they achieve them, and then it's time to move. To something better, to the next level, which would be like graduating from 6th grade to 7th grade or from senior year to college. That's an exciting time to be able to go on and do more with your life. But it never ended. And again, that's another thing we don't focus on in the left, in the West. Literally, if you go any place east of here, everybody believes in reincarnation of some form or fashion. The Hindus, the I think Muslims maybe even do in some degree. I'm not a pro in that area, but Buddhists, there's just continuation of life in some form. Now, maybe some Buddhist factions believe you come back as a bug, but still, your essence is not lost. So think about it that way. That's a beautiful thought, I think, that this person did great work and they're being rewarded. It's time to move to the next level. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But of course we miss them, and of course we're going to grieve for them. So if that helps, I hope it does. But if there's a choice and we have the ability to believe that there is something beyond, that's what sustains me. I tried to go many years in life thinking that it meant nothing and that we're only here and then we die and all that crap, and it only kept me using. So if anybody's out there struggling, try to reject some of those old ideas and adopt this new way of thinking that there's got to be more. There's got to be a reason why we're going through all this. Certainly with my alcoholism, it can't just be about this life. There's got to be a deeper point. So it helps me, and I hope it can help you as well. Any last thoughts on this tricky little topic of death, grief, and loss, Dan? I've picked your brains apart, but
I do tend to go with the theory that I want to celebrate that I was able to know this person rather than, make that the overriding thing. Celebrate that I knew him or her rather than focus on the fact that they're now gone. Pretty clean cut.
Now, without the drinking, though, that's actually a big tradition in Irish cultures is, you go to the church and to the funeral and everybody's sad, but then you go to the bar and you regale and all the jokes and all the crazy things they did when they were alive and all the funny stories you have on them.
Yep. And I had a friend do that not long ago, and I was a little torn. I was glad to be there, and I showed up for him, but she wanted them to have a party when she died, and they did, and everybody was talking about her. And that husband is the first guy in years and years ago said, "We're going to put the fun in funeral."
I have never heard that.
Haven't you?
No.
That's where I heard it from him, and they did. But it's a little, ultimately alcohol had an impact on her early departure, if you want to think that. She was in her lower 60s. And to go pour gallons of it down your throat in celebration of that is a little bit odd too.
Well, I heard another speaker say not only do we have the image of people pouring alcohol on graves, and maybe alcohol is the thing that killed them, but the other speaker was saying, we go to these funerals and the person died from diabetes, heart disease, and cancer, and then we go to these wakes afterwards where we serve the same foods that killed them.
Yep.
There's a depressing thought for everybody. All right. Well, to wrap it up, guys, a sense of humor helps tremendously, and I'm a big fan of dark humor, so try to have a little sense of humor with the Grim Reaper and all that other stuff. But think about that. Talk to your loved ones, talk to the friends around you, and see if there's any avenues for dialogue to begin to just soften the blow. And people feel so isolated when they're going through a loss. And like I said, they start questioning themselves, like, I don't want to bring it up. I feel like I'm repeating myself. You're not. Your friends will support you, and it's okay. You feel just how you feel. So I hope that helps. Again, send us your feedback. We'd like to hear from you. I am 12recovery@gmail.com. Now we will transition to our question and answer period where we take your things and try to help you out with your journey in life. Alrighty, here's our questions for the week. 2 great questions to discuss about sobriety and recovery. Number 1, hey folks, I have a sponsee that called me and said that they were drinking again. And I've worked with this person a while, and we've been trying to get at the core of it. And I think they finally told me what's going on. It took a while to dig, though, and they finally told me, bottom line was, I just can't believe in God, was the quote. So I wasn't quite sure what to tell this person at that point. So I called my sponsor, which is always great. Call your sponsor and supports for feedback about what I should say to that person, because they're still drinking and I really love them and I want to help them. So any thoughts on this? Yes. So there's this general misunderstanding with new people that I try to disabuse them of very early, especially if I'm their sponsor, that AA is about God, religion, and all that jazz. And it can really seem that way because God, the word itself, is in the 12 steps. So I understand that. But that's the sign of their old religious baggage coming up. Okay. Anytime there's a conflict or a friction or a feeling of that's the way I called it. I was talking to one of my patients in aftercare about their experience with having to get over their religious baggage / trauma to be able to believe in anything in the program, because you get to choose your own conceptions. And I said, yeah, it's that feeling of just like every time they brought it up in my earlier recovery, I'd be like, like sunlight on a vampire. And so when that happens, that's showing you that what happened to you with that was not comfortable and you didn't like it. And that's what has to be addressed. You've got to get with this person and say, you've got baggage that's getting in your way from understanding. Because I've told you, I'm sure you have as a sponsor many times, you get to choose your own conception. This is about what you think. What would your higher power look like? If you could have a perfect higher power, what qualities would you like in that higher power? Would you like a higher power that is caring and gives a shit about you? Okay, let's write that down. Would you like a higher power that is forgiving? That's probably important since you've done a lot of bad things. So let's say yes on that one. And then you help them to build this new power. But until you can do that work, you've got to go through the past. And so I would ask this person, look, obviously some bad things happened around this issue of God, because you go to any child under 5 and talk to them about God, and God is nothing but awesome. It's after that when they get hurt by adults and their ideas. And keep hammering that with this person too, that he has their conception of a higher power, not his own. That right now his is getting in the way. This is what Ebby did for Bill when he visited him and told him, I'm going to this group where these guys, you get to choose your own higher power. And Bill was like, that's a revolutionary concept, because I've been sitting here bitching about everybody else's ideas, like we do as addicts and alcoholics, right? We bitch at the Christians, we bitch at the Baptists, we bitch at the Muslims. They're all wrong, but we never turn that back around and say, what do I think? Screw everybody else's idea. What's my idea? So that's all that is. He has this idea that he's got to believe in this old religious, probably tyrant, zealot, vengeful God, and somebody ruined him with as a child. And so he's rejecting that outright. I can't believe in that. No, that pisses me off. And that's number 1. Number 2 is the most important thing. You don't have to believe in anything to begin the 12 steps. And I love what Dan says about that, I'm going to let you quote yourself. Don't worry about what you believe. Do your little deal about, do you believe that?
Do you believe that I believe that this will work for you? And without question, my friend said, fuck yeah, you seem to be convinced of that fact.
So you can lean on that I believe it'll work for you. That it's kind of putting the cart before the horse, and explain that to this fella as well. I'm assuming fella. We don't know if it's female or male. But the whole process of going through the steps is to find your higher power. You're going to have experiences along the way. Now, think about it this way, all you druggies out there. If I had a little pill in my hand and I said, come with me, Alice, if you take this little pill, we're going to go down the rabbit hole and you're going to have some really crazy, mystical, wild things happen to you. You'd be like, yeah, let's go, right? That's the steps. You need to hear that, all you newcomers out here. That is the work, to go on the journey with your sponsors hand in hand. And you're going to have these things happen that are going to build your faith. It's undeniable. During the 5th step, afterwards, during 6 and 7, during your 9th step amends, you're going to have very sacred experiences that are personalized just for you, which is the only way you can get faith in anything, guys. You do not get faith out of a book or by going to a building and hearing it from somebody else. There's still going to be that part of your ego that says, well, I believe, but I don't really trust it. Ain't going to give it a little bit of inch. That thing will burn you, don't wait. Yeah, that's just who we are as human beings. We live in fear most of the time. So, again, he's putting the cart before the horse. It's really about going on the journey, and it may just be a delay tactic that they just want to continue drinking. So I would very patiently go to great lengths to explain all this. You don't have to believe in anything. You're putting the cart before the horse. You get to choose your own conception. I'll help you with that. We need to talk about your baggage, what happened to you. And if at that point they're still saying, I just can't do it, I think what they might be saying is, I'm not ready to get sober yet. And that's okay. Tell them that's an option. If you need to drink some more, maybe you don't have the gift of desperation, which somebody in my group said that's God in the program. G-O-D, gift of desperation. I was like, I haven't heard that one in a while. I hope that helps. But Dan, what do you think about this? Because, a lot of guys have this weird idea that they have to believe in God to get sober. It's like, no, you don't believe in nothing right now. You believe in your bottle. That's your higher power.
Yeah. Yep. Just echo you again, it's doing the work has got me in touch with that. And you and I we play this game about the best thing about recovery, but we actually solidified on it in an earlier episode that higher power, that relationship reliance on higher power is really the best thing. That is, everything else dangles off of that. That's the top of the pyramid. So, that's a good point. Is he or she just simply not ready to get sober, or it's some kind of trauma from their past that they're not disclosing,
or it's both. Can be.
Yeah. And
it's a great stall tactic, right? What a great thing to hide your desire to keep drinking, to just say, well, I just can't get with what you ordered.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what we're saying, brother. Apparently you're hearing it wrong.
Yeah.
We're not saying you got to believe in anything to get started. I also think it's important with my new guy to break down anything that he has a passion for. And I have yet to meet an alcoholic, even when they're dead from chemicals, who didn't have passions about something. It could be their children. It could be about their freedom and staying out of prison. It could be about music. But again, when my sponsors got tired of me bitching about the God stuff and was telling me to shut up and just do the work, and he finally just looked at me and said, what about cats? And I'm like, what do you mean, what about cats? He goes, you talk about you'd love to have a cat, but you got asthma, and you try to have that cat, and it took you to the damn emergency room. But if you could have a cat, and you love cats, why the hell do you like cats so much? And I was like, I don't know. They're freaking cool. They're not like dogs. They don't like everybody. They got their own personality. And I'm kind of like that. And, it's just, I think they're freaking awesome. He goes, great. Can you make a cat? I'm like, that's a stupid question. I'm like, no, stupid newcomer. Can you make a damn cat? No. So you're telling me on your own power you can't go home and construct a cat? No, I cannot. Can we agree then logically that must have been a power greater than you that made that cat? Yes, I see what you're saying. Then use that. What do you mean use that? Well, you have a passion for a cat. Does it help you not kill yourself to think that a power out there could make something as beautiful and wonderful as a cat to give you something to worth hanging on in this life for? Yeah, okay. I can use that as strength not to drink. Same as if you had a child you felt that way about, a niece, a nephew, a neighbor kid, or your career, your passion to one day do something, go climb Mount Everest. You can hang on to that shit as your higher power at first, because it's got to be something that you feel. This is where people go wrong. They say, I believe, and they don't really trust it. They don't feel shit about it. But you got to have it in here, in your heart. Somebody said in group today that if you say in the West to somebody, where do you exist? They'll point here. But if you say that question in the East, they'll point here to the heart. And I said, yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. So walk them through all that. Be patient as you can. But if you get that feeling and through your sponsor that maybe they're just basically saying, I'm not ready, I think that's another issue that sponsors are reluctant to bring up, because, we have this idea that I'm supposed to get them sober. No, you're not. Everybody has their own sacred journey, and you need to honor that. And I'm more than happy to tell my guy, hey, I accept you. I love you regardless. If you decide to still drink, I still love you. If you want to come back, great, we're here for you. But if you're not ready, I can respect that decision. Any last thoughts about that, Dan?
Nope. I think we wrapped it up.
All right, good. I hope that helps. If you want to send us an update, as we always say, please feel free to drop us another line on that. All right, second question for today. All right. I'm going to make this short but sweet. I am sober, but it's not getting better. I'm running into a lot of trouble at my job and with insurance and other legal stuff. And what they talk about in the program, I guess it's called life on life's terms. So when does all this good stuff begin to happen? And why is all this bad stuff still going on? Thank you for the honesty. That's exactly how I felt in early recovery many times. Let's explain that term first, and it's something that I think is vital if you want to be happy in life. Life on life's terms, which means that the world is not going to cooperate with our wishes, our hopes, our dreams. It's just not. I've lived 62 years on this planet, and I've seen that you have to make peace with that. If you don't and you fight it, you'll be miserable and bitter and cynical the rest of your life. I heard a speaker one time challenge that, which I like. I like speakers that challenge phrases we have, cliches, things like that. And he said, well, I don't believe life makes terms. And then I heard another speaker challenge him and say, really? What happens if you don't brush your teeth, bro? And he goes, well, I got bad breath. Yeah, you got bad breath. And you have no friends. And you lose all your teeth. What happens if you don't go to the bathroom? Well, yeah, you blow up and you die. You will drown in your own crap. So what a term is that at some point in the day, life is going to tap you on the shoulder and say, stop everything you're doing, walk to this room in private and relieve yourself. And again, that is going to get in the way of my hopes and dreams. I'm trying to accomplish this. I'm trying to be that. But it's life on life's terms, not Christopher's terms, not Dan's terms. And that's practicing that humility piece of the program, okay? I'm sober, but it's not getting better. Well, the thing I explain to my patients is that recovery is like a tsunami. And if you were those poor people in Japan, when the tsunami hit and the water went out, because that's the first thing that happens after the quake is the water's. And so people come into recovery and they feel better and they can taste their food and they're sleeping better and their wife starting to treat them a little bit better and they're staying sober and they're like, oh, this is great. It's what we call the pink cloud. I must be okay. And suddenly everything they've done in the past shows up. You know, your consequences, your karma, it's going to bear down on you at some point. And this is a huge trigger point for many people in early recovery that they don't expect it. So if you're a sponsor, make sure you prepare your new person for that. Say, hey, if you're in a pink cloud, it's great. Enjoy it. I would never knock people. Don't ever knock anybody off their pink cloud. That's rude and it's unfair. If they're having some good days in their recovery, please let them enjoy those. But also warn them that's not normal. You can't stay in that zone forever. If you could have felt that way forever before, you never would have drank, okay? So that's just a little chemical effect you're getting through your detox. Enjoy those good days. But you're going to have to pay some dues. You've been doing a lot of bad things for a long time. And when that wave comes in, it can feel like it's engulfing you, just like that tsunami wave that took away all those poor people. So that is the time to reach out to your sponsor and grab on and say, I'm going to tell you my true response. I don't really believe this works. I'm not seeing it getting any better, and I've got all this stuff going on. And if you will air that out, your load will be lighter and you'll have a better chance to stay sober today. Do not carry it by yourself. Sometimes people get the feeling that when things bad happen in their recovery, they're doing something wrong. And it's like, no. Or they'll say stupid stuff. I mean stupid lightly. They'll say things like, I think God is punishing me or God is testing me. It's like, no. You're like a little newborn babe just learning how to walk. God's not going to put his foot out and trip you, okay? So, but this is your stuff. You broke the law. So, yes, the police are showing up. You hurt your wife. Yes, so suddenly you got divorce papers. You stole from your job and you thought you got away with it. But now they have video and they're talking about firing you. You better find your higher power soon in terms of your sponsor and your supports. That's your first idea of a power greater than you is the group. You better lean on them. You better talk to them. Do not keep it to yourself because it will overwhelm you. It will engulf you. Eventually that wave will subside and it will become more of just life on life's terms when it shows up. There is an ebb and flow to life. I think Dan would agree where it seems like there's a lot going on and then there's times where it's more peaceful and then I got a lot of doctor's appointments and then there's times where I don't have any this month and it's just, I don't know. We have to learn how to flow with a lot of that stuff. And that's kind of a general rule for the entire program. I'm trying to make this ego of mine right-sized to fit into other people's wishes and into the world's desires and not just my plan. Because if I go out the door just with my plan and I'm going to push it, I'm going to be in conflict with others, and there's going to be collision and lots of devastation. And I'll feel like the world's not treating me right, and I'll drink, and it'll be all over. So again, please talk to your sponsor. Make sure they're aware that you're going through this. You're going to get resentments. And the first thing we do with the resentments is we blame God, and God's not causing this. Remember, we caused this. I did these things that are causing this wave to come crashing in my world. I'm the one that brought CPS into the world. Now, when I say I say that lightly too, because again, you have a disease, you were powerless. But ownership. Ownership means I did it. Ownership also means I can work on it and I can make it better, and I won't have this stuff in my life ever again. So, Dan, did you ever have a sponsee approach you and say, why is it not getting better, or when's it going to get better?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. And I really like that tsunami explanation. My experience is that every newcomer is going to go through some kind of trials and tribulations in early recovery, almost to a piece that I sometimes question the cunning, baffling powerfulness of this disease, and is it actually capable of like putting pressure on you so you will go to do what you used to do and stop this new behavior. It's crazy how I can't think of anybody that doesn't have early recovery woes, man. And I didn't really think about that. You know, you've stopped causing new ones, but that wave of old shit comes at you, and that is, I'm going to start using that. 10 years here, and don't think I recall you giving that explanation before. Cool. That is a cool thing about sitting over here. I'll tell you another thing that is, just in case you're not following this podcast real closely, almost the very first thing to do when anything happens is talk to your sponsor. That is, every time we give advice, tell your sponsor about it. Talk to your sponsor about it. No matter what the question is and what the problem is, it's talk to your sponsor about it.
And the angle I try to coach my patients on is ask them if they went through it. Ask them what they did with the God stuff. Ask them what they did when life showed up. Ask them if they had the pink cloud. Yes, most often, yes, they've had their own experience with this. Yeah. And if they haven't, they can call their sponsor, and their sponsor can call their sponsor. Now, for those of you who don't have a sponsor and you're just starting out and you might be one of these more normal people trying to work some recovery tools, it would be your number one support person, your bestie. Okay, is that what they call it nowadays? Who's my bestie? And make sure they know what's happening and what you're going through so they can support you. It's a lot easier to go through the worst in life holding somebody's hand than it is all by yourself. I can avow that to a T.
And the another thing is we're particularly sensitive during that period too. So little things even feel like big things. I can remember panicking over stuff today that I laugh about now. Go, really? I was that upset about that.
Or I didn't think it could be worked out, and higher power and the tools took care of it, right?
Amen. Yep.
I mean, time and time again, that happens with newcomers. They're freaking out. It's like, dude, keep working the tools. Yep. It'll get better one day at a time.
Yep.
And usually they're freaking about something in the future. It hasn't even happened yet.
Always.
I'll put a shout out for our good friend Cody, man. Our good friend Cody had a problem in his life recently that was a challenge, and he put it out there. He put it out in the Discord and said, I need a meeting. And the guys in the group showed up. They said, hell yeah, I'll be there. Hell yeah, I'll be there. And then my patients actually were there last night too. And they said, it was great to see those guys there from Spiritual Underground. The meeting sucked. But the cool part was the meeting after the meeting. We all sat around and talked. And again, support makes life on life's terms more bearable. And you'll get through it. You will get through it. It will break you on your own. Do not do it alone. Any other thoughts on that? How about Dan's thoughts on life's terms and how hard that is to accept, and then we'll wrap it up.
It is, it's like all the rest of the stuff. This one day at a time tool makes life on life's terms a lot more manageable.
Do you remember me even bringing that topic up, or did we got to that point in the book? Do you remember that even jumping out as a thing?
What?
Life on life's terms.
We talked about them. I mean, I don't remember any particular conversation specifically.
I mean, for you, you had an ankle bracelet and we're facing possibly 20 years, you know. So.
And they were tapping me on the shoulder and, telling me I was 90 seconds late to my meeting with them, and it would flip me out, and, they could punch my buttons because I was real serious about not getting any more involved with them than I absolutely had to be. And those are some of the things I remember being upset over, how they treated me down there. I was a freaking felon criminal. How you want to be treated.
You remember when I came back at you and I said, well, why don't you ask them how their day is going?
Yeah.
I thought Dan was going to reach his fist through the phone and punch me in the face.
Yep. And then that miracle happened with that lady down there too. And one day she was off, and it was in my heart to say, so what's going on? Are you okay? And she just unloaded on me, man. And the whole dynamic in the relationship, she was still my social worker down there. She was a social worker, not a correction person. But yeah, that panned out to be a friendship that lasts to today. My damn probation officer, basically.
She told you about her husband?
Yeah, her husband had been diagnosed with colon cancer. And
Wow.
And she was upset, but she was, muscling up and going to work, I guess.
Well, you got to get your paycheck sometimes.
Yep.
But what's cool about that story is even in the worst thing that Dan's going through, he found an opportunity to be of service.
Yep.
And that is how we do this thing. That is truly one of the greatest miracles of this program, that even Christopher, can get out of his own ego and head and his way of what his plan is and agendas, that I can actually do some good in my day. And that's the things you're going to remember at the end of the day, is being there for her. And then consequently, she ended up coming to your birthday celebrations.
Yep, she did. Yep. And she's a friend on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
She came to my first few birthdays.
So one last tool I'll give everybody too, and for this person, try to have a sense of humor about your stuff. A, you're not alone. Every person coming in has their whole world crashing down around them. B, bring it up in a burning desire, and ask for other people's experience, and listen to everybody talk about what was crashing around. Somebody in my group recently was talking about not getting enough pay from their payer support program from their employer. And I'm like, Lordy, I had not a penny in my pocket when I had treatment, bro. And again, why do we do that? We're not comparing what size. We're doing that so that somebody can have some balance and perspective that maybe their situation is not as bad. When you hear other people's stories in the meetings, I jokingly say, when I say the sense of humor, if life on life's terms demands that once every year or two, and because of my family history, I need to take a prep that makes me clear out my entire bowels, and then I need to put myself in the hands of strangers for them to put a 30-foot tube up my butt. If you can't have a sense of humor, you're going to have a hard time with life. That is part of life, folks. You just have to do what you got to do. Buffalo that shit, as we say.
Yeah. And, the fact is that we usually end up having watch for the miracle resolve of this problem later.
Yeah.
And make a note on it, put it on your miracle list, how you were so upset about this, and it fixed itself later on down the road. And the second thought just left me.
That's all right. It'll come to you when I'm saying this. I was just thinking about when I go in there to the room, my doctor's always got rock and roll playing, and he's always cheery. And so I go in there and I try and cheer. Yeah, come on, guys, let's do this thing. It's just, somebody else in my group said this too, one of my aftercare people, about how cool it is when you're working your tools and you do little things like you did for your probation officer. You're suddenly walking out of the doctor's office and your nurse is giving you a hug. Yeah. Or, you go to work. I think it was Shane was talking about, and he shares what's going on with the person's life, and he just listens to him for a few minutes. Mm-hmm. And they end up hugging him. They've never met him before, and they're hugging their plumber on the way out the door.
I had the same thing happen to me.
Isn't that great?
Yep.
So please, folks, use these tools. You will change the world more ways than you even know.
Yeah, we usually do turn around and laugh at this stuff later on. It ends up being a humorous thing later on, but in the moment, it's tough to turn that around.
Right, because it's happening to me.
Right, yeah.
And it's real.
And it's right now.
Yeah, it's right now. But it also becomes your greatest tools later to help somebody else that you went through these things.
Yep.
So suit up and show up, man. You can get through this with help. All right. Thank you for the questions. Again, if you want to send any more in, please do. We want to hear from you. Again, I'm challenging everybody in our personal support system. Send us some stories, some comments, some stuff to talk about, because we need the service work. We were trying to spread this to a lot of people. So iam12recovery@gmail.com. Also, please like, subscribe, and comment so that we can get our analytics up and keep sharing it with more people. I think Dan told me today we're up to 8,500 views, which is pretty extraordinary. We just started on April 29th. So but that is within our own little bubble of sphere of influence. These are all our friends and our connections. So let's see if we can't share this on social media and spread it around. And don't think that somebody doesn't need to or doesn't want to hear about it. Just say, hey, I was thinking about you, thought you might like this or whatever, and try it out. We're just trying to help as many people as we can with this. And Dan and I are doing this out of our service work, not for ego, not for money or glory or fame. We're doing this because we want to give back to everybody what we've been given from this beautiful gift of recovery. So I hope you'll come back and join us next week. We're going to have some great things. As I said, LJ will be coming up in a little while here. He's a good friend with a great story, crazy stories. And in the meantime, we'd like to close the program with a serenity prayer, as we do in meetings lots of times. So Dan, if you want to join me, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. You die if you don't. Woo! Keep having fun. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.